do is adore you all of the time. I'd like to. I'd like to.
So today's episode was recorded without a mic stand because the table I usually strap it to has fucked off somewhere. So we're using a handheld mic. Isn't necessarily a bad thing. There might be a bit of background noise, but it means I can do spontaneous shit like this. I can now deliver the rest of the podcast from up here, though you might not be able to see my head, so I'll go back down. So, welcome back to Raine podcast. Today we'll be talking about a interesting topic developing on our character conversation last week. We'll be looking at heroes and villains, and we'll be going over quite an important element of character creation that I actually glossed over last week, so stick around and hopefully you'll get my gist. So, what is this crucial element that I missed out on last week? Well, it's of course the alignment table. Lawful to chaotic on one axis and good to evil on the other. And who fits where in this table and what each part of this table means is hotly debated and has never really truly been defined, but I think I have a way of putting it down quite simply, and it involves one simple scenario. A chicken in a cage. Let's start from the top. A lawful good character would see this chicken in a cage. It's obviously not a free-range chicken. They would pay for the chicken from whoever is keeping it in the cage, and then move it to a location where it would be more free to move around. And how the lawful good character would differ from the neutral good character is the lawful good character would continue to provide for that chicken, paying for its food and whatever form of income the farmer may need to keep said chicken. Neutral good, as I said, would be more or less the same as the lawful good, though they would just pay for the chicken and dump it off at some farm where it would be happier. And a chaotic good would steal the chicken in order to move it to a free-range farm. A lawful neutral character may call the authorities on this owner of the chicken, saying it's not being kept humanely, though. Lawful neutral characters can be varying. Neutral tends to balance between chaotic and evil, not necessarily staying in the middle, though I'll get to that shortly. A true neutral character might observe a chicken in this cage and think it's not right to keep it there, but might not necessarily do anything about it. It's a conflict of interests, and whether they want to create an evil act or a good act in a lawful or chaotic manner, they're unsure of, and that's where the true neutral area lies. A chaotic neutral character would also, like chaotic good, steal the chicken, but imaginably with the idea of eating it. Moving on to the evil side of the table, you've got lawful evil. A lawful evil would build a sustainable free-range farm on which to store all their stolen chickens. A neutral evil might kill the chicken on the spot to put it out of its misery, though that's somewhat of a good act, some might think. Neutral evil is another interesting area that can be balanced between chaos and law. And chaotic evil, of course, I think we can all guess what's happening here. He's killing the farmer and he's killing the chicken along with him. So, those are my takes on the 9 areas of the alignment charts in reference to a chicken in a cage. Everyone may have their own views, but that's how we're going to start this video, by looking at the 9 different ways a character can interact with the world around him. Next bit of this video, which we'll be moving on to now, is different archetypes of characters and how they fit into different areas of the chart. You've got your lawful good antagonist, presumably, though not necessarily all the time. Perhaps they could slip into evil at some point. And of course you've got your antagonist, slipping down into the chaotic evil realm, almost as if the corners of each part of the graph oppose one another, born to be rivals and born to hate one another. So, in terms of character archetypes, you've got a few that come to mind. Protagonist, antagonist, a sidekick to the protagonist, anti-hero character. Those are just 4 among a whole host of different types of character, though we're going to look at those 4 for today, and I'll run you through different ways to write those characters. Naturally, we should start with the protagonist, the hero of the story, though this will be slightly different if you're writing a story where the main character is an antagonist and in their eyes is the protagonist, so bear that in mind if that's the kind of story you want to write. But we're thinking of fighting for good protagonist, and this is where it can get fairly varying with different characters. You'd assume any protagonist fighting for good to be a lawful good character, but it's entirely possible that they are chaotic good. They'll cause a lot of damage and do not necessarily great things in order to achieve good. Or perhaps even they're lawful evil. Perhaps they have a bad goal, but the way that they carry it out benefits everyone. So how do you write these characters? Well, you can write it in the way they act. How do they think through situations? And that's the power of using thoughts as speech. Rather than just using dialogue and roughly summarizing what the character might think, maybe slap on some italics and explain to the reader the inner monologue of the character as they think it in real time. The protagonist will always have an arc over the whole story. They'll be the character that reoccurs almost throughout the entire novel or book, whatever you may be writing. So it's important to get that down. Will they still have the same goal by the end? Will they have completed it? It's up to you as to whether the advancement of the story allows for their goal to be met or even to be worked towards, and to what extent. Okay, let's move on to antagonists. Antagonists, or villains, can be minor or major. Minor antagonists will be around the middle of the book and they'll have some development, but more or less they will just be a stepping stone for the protagonist to conquer on his route to the major antagonist. Perhaps you could have a scenario where minor antagonists join up with the protagonist, switching sides to face down the major antagonist. It's been seen before in many medias. But we're going to focus on the major antagonist for this little episode. And when you look at the chart again, this is where you start to see those grey areas. An antagonist could be chaotic good. It could be that they really do mean well, but they can't quite express it and end up being viewed as evil. Or perhaps they are lawful evil, though they are undoubtedly against good. They do it in a way as such that it's not directly offensive and can even sometimes be within the law. It's simple exploitation or something like that. And that's where that grey area comes. You can have a protagonist and an antagonist with the same alignment, but facing off against each other, and it's that conflict within alignment that shows the depth of said alignment. So how do you write an antagonist? Again, it's writing about how they act in certain ways. Would they execute prisoners, or perhaps they're the lawful evil type who would let them live? Or maybe it could be the kind of character that kills and slays whoever they come across. Or perhaps they're looking for gold and would rather focus on that than taking another human's life. That's your antagonist character settled down. Let's move on to the anti-hero. For those of you that don't know, an anti-hero is sort of the definition of chaotic good or lawful evil. In fact, they generally have some code of honor, or they want to achieve good or maybe evil, but they do it in a way such that it might not necessarily benefit the hero, but not the villain's goals either. They're a grey area in themselves. I'd say they kind of cut a diagonal line from lawful evil down to chaotic good. There have been some excellent videos on writing anti-heroes whilst avoiding cliches all over YouTube, but essentially what you want to get across is this is the character that opposes a hero but also opposes a villain in almost a vigilante as such. Just don't go too overboard with the edge or anything. That's something that's covered in other videos about anti-heroes. The fourth and final archetype that I'll talk about is sidekicks, or other secondary protagonists. Characters who might not necessarily get as much development as the main protagonist, but are still equally important to the development of both the plot and the main protagonist. How they act can impact on how the protagonist acts. Maybe the protagonist has a plan, but a secondary protagonist puts that in jeopardy. How would both those characters act, and resultingly, how would they interact? And you can show this, and it's a way of demonstrating their kind of alignment in this way. What if the lawful neutral protagonist locks horns with the lawful good secondary protagonist? Perhaps one is unsure about the morals of the other and confronts him about it. That could be a whole situation for your characters to overcome and resultantly develop from in your story. There's not much to say about secondary protagonists, and I won't go into any more depth with other characters such as background characters, which I mentioned last video. What I'll do for the rest of this video is show you how you can differentiate between the different types of characters when their alignments may overlap. It could be things like appearance. You see, I am currently dressed in this hat and sunglasses, making me seem like the villain type, because to wear these, you'd have to be committing a crime against fashion. And this is particularly prevalent in fantasy. Antagonists might normally wear black armor, whereas a protagonist wears white or a bright silver armor. These colors can show a character's alignment in a way that description might not be able to. You just got to pick out these small parts of their characters that really demonstrate the alignment to the reader. And it's these subtle differences in appearance that are really important when it comes to describing a character. You see, if the protagonist meets up with the antagonist for the first time, he may be able to immediately discern the alignment of his foe based on how they dress themselves. Is it a long flowing mage's robe? Perhaps he knows that the enemy, though he doesn't know them personally, would be a magic user. That would be a dead giveaway. Or maybe it's the weapons that they carry, a blade coated in poison or something equally deadly may suggest that it's a foe rather than friend. Small details again. Pick out your individual points and make sure to emphasize them. Don't let them be passing notes. Don't just drop them in when it feels convenient to the point, and by no means, never ever, and I'm equally guilty of this, never add something when it's convenient. If you feel like you need something to create a balance between the protagonist or antagonist, whether you're adding it to either of them, just never have it suddenly appear. If you're publishing on Wattpad like I do, this is quite hard because you'd have to go back and edit a chapter that you've already published. But if you're writing all in one, ready to be published at the very end, then you can go back and add subtle hints to what you're about to introduce in the present. And that way it doesn't seem like a convenient buyout that you've thrown in to balance out a fight that would otherwise have been completely unfair in one direction or the other. And fights is something we'll get onto a bit later as well. Combat's another episode that I hope to cover in the future. But we'll be jumping straight into creating our own character right now. I think for this episode we'll keep working with the character we created last time, Whitlock, and we'll look at his alignment and how he fits into the hero-villain sort of landscape. So Whitlock was the character I created last time. He slays undead for revenge, so perhaps there's some element of lawful in him. He wants a job done, he has a code of honor, and I mentioned that last time, how he respects others, though he treats undead as essentially dirt beneath his feet. So there is some lawful element there, though there is a hint of evil, but I think his intentions are good enough to pull him into the lawful neutral sort of area. But again, the alignment chart is up to everyone's interpretation, so that's just how I see it, and I think that's a fairly fitting area to put Whitlock in as a character. And you can do this for your own characters. You don't have to, and it might not be something you directly mention in the story, but it's good for knowing roughly where you want to fit your character in terms of the balance of good and evil in your story. Thank you for watching. I really do enjoy making all this content for you. Regardless of how many people watch it, every Sunday night I'm happy to sit here and record. Please subscribe, like, turn on notifications, though it'll be here every Monday. I made a deal with a friend of mine that when I hit 50 subscribers I would do an episode while drunk, and given my past history of drinking, that may be an entertaining episode, and you can help reach that by hitting that subscribe button. But yeah, overall I'm happy with this series. I'm not sure how many people will watch this far in this video, and feel free to go. I'll just be rambling for a little while longer. I really enjoy making this series, even if it's going out to no one. If nobody watched, I'd still make it. I get to talk about something I love to do, and that makes me happier than anything, really. Next week we'll hopefully be pulling in a guest for a episode. I can't tell you the topic yet because that'll depend on the guests we get and what they want to talk about. I'm open to anyone in the comments if you want to come on the show. I'd gladly have anyone who is interested in joining me up here. I'd set up some kind of Skype or Discord call, or if you're local, you could even come down and we can record. I'd love to have you. So if you're interested in joining me on the show, hit me up at wjrediting@gmail.com. I will most likely respond to it within a day. Usually on my computer, so I'll see that come through. If you want to check out my other stuff, I've never really advertised my other medias on this show. You can get me at will_j_raine at Instagram. I don't tend to use Facebook or Twitter, though you can find my accounts on there just by looking at my name, though they are quite outdated. Otherwise, you can find me on Behind the Voice. As I mentioned back in the trailer, though it was quite drowned out by the music, I am a widely unsuccessful voice actor trying to get better. If you need this voice on anything, just hit me up again. I'm available on Behind the Voice and Custom Tool Collective. And I hope to see you next week. Hopefully you'll be coming back. Peace.